So, this month we've been looking at different aspects of the Christian life. Prayer, we looked at worship. Last week we looked at, what did we look at last week? Gifts. We looked at our spiritual gifts as ways that we can utilize to go out into the world and allow God to work in us and through us. So today we're going to look at service. And normally when people use trying to serve, they'll talk about the passage in Matthew 25 where it says the sheep and the goats. The sheep are going to go this side, goats are going to go this side. You serve this and this and this and you did it in my name, so therefore you did it for them, therefore you did it for me. And I wanted to do something a little different. So our main passage is going to be out of Luke chapter 1. Before we go there, the writer in the book of Hebrews begins chapter 13 with these words. Keep loving each other like family. Don't neglect to open homes to guests, because by doing this, some have been hosts to angels without even knowing it. So like I said, today we're continuing our series in exploring the different aspects of the Christian life. And today we're going to look at the discipline of service. We're going to be in Luke 1 for the kind of the main focus of it. But really, before we can look at service, we're going to talk about grace. And John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, described grace in 3 different movements. He talked about prevenient grace first. This is a grace that is before us, that is with us, before that we even realize and know that God is with us. So we can kind of think about this as, we're on the porch of a house. We know there's a house there, but we don't know what's inside. We don't know what's going to be there. Or we may be on a porch. We could have sunglasses or blinders on. We don't even know where we are. But we're still close enough to be safe enough to the house, whether we realize it or not. You can feel the door frame. Justifying grace. This is when we know that God is pursuing us. So we accept the grace that He offers. And this is like entering the house, going through the door. And then there's sanctifying grace. This is the aspect of grace that we experience when we knowingly live in the presence of God. That's a key word. When we knowingly live in the presence of God. And that's when we enter the house. We live with all that we need. But there's always work to be done. So we know we're saved. We know we're in the presence and the love and the grace of God. And we have the opportunity to serve. So there's only one grace. There's only one grace that God offers and that we can accept. But we can really experience grace in many ways. Some people say that once you just accept one time God's love, accept one time Jesus Christ, that's it. Truth is that grace is a process. Going into the movement of sanctifying grace, it's a process. We have to continually accept it and continually allow God to fill us, to work in us and through us every day. Sometimes I go through days where it seems like every half hour. So that's when we live in the house. We're living in the light and the love of God. We know there's work to be done. So we're going to do the work of the Father, but we get to do the work with the Father. That is something that's really cool. So true service comes from a life that's constantly accepting to live in the presence of God and because we truly love those around us. So some questions that we'll kind of think about as we hear the passage in Luke and through the message is, what is service? When can our service be helpful? When can our service be harmful? And I'm guaranteeing that there are people that would agree with some of the things that I'm going to say on some of this. But it's what I feel like needs to be said, so it doesn't matter. Why do we serve? And who do we serve? So as we take time to answer and to look at these questions, we're going to start in Luke chapter 1. And this is when John the Baptist is birth is foretold. We're going to start in verse 5. During the rule of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was a descendant of Aaron. That was the first high priest, Moses' brother. They were both righteous before God, blameless in their observance of all the Lord's commandments and regulations. They had no children because Elizabeth was unable to become pregnant, and they were both very old. One day Zechariah was serving as a priest before God because his priestly division was on duty. Following the customs of priestly service, he was chosen by lottery to go into the Lord's sanctuary and burn incense. All the people who gathered to worship were praying outside this hour of incense burning, offering. Then he goes on to say that an angel's going to appear to him. He's going to talk with the angel. He's going to go over the birth of John the Baptist that's coming up. And then starting in verse 21, meanwhile the people were waiting for Zechariah, and they wondered why he was in the sanctuary for such a long time. When he came out, he was unable to speak to them. Then they realized that he had seen a vision in the temple, for he gestured to them and couldn't speak. When he completed the days of his priestly service, he returned home. So Zechariah is in the temple and he's performing his priestly service. So this was a way of life for him. And it was a huge deal, especially in their time, to be chosen to go do the ministering, to do the serving at the temple, to offer the prayers for that hour and to burn the incense in the holy sanctuary of the temple. And Zechariah gives us the example that service should be a way of life, because as a priest at that time, they had constant duties that they had to do. But you have to imagine that and really believe that as they're doing it, they really understood why they were doing it. So their service, their work became more heartfelt for at least some of the priests at that time, not all of them. So what service? We all like the idea of being served, but we really do grovel at the idea of actually serving. I would personally rather someone do it for me than me having to do it myself. And for many of us, the thought of, well, if the situation calls me to serve, I will. Or, if no one else will step up, I guess I have to. So these thoughts really do pop into our heads. And the truth is that no one sitting here today can say anything other than agreement to those thoughts, because we all have them at times. And having these particular thoughts about service doesn't necessarily make us bad people, but it should fill us with the desire to search our hearts. Even King David begged God, "Search me, try me, cleanse me." And the purpose is to realign our hearts with God and follow the second greatest commandment, which is love your neighbor as yourself. And the author of Hebrews that I read earlier invites us to be open to anyone so that we can love them like family. And Zechariah shows us that service is a lifestyle. Yes, he was serving in the temple, and he did have his set duties that he had to do, but that was how he was living. It was how he was supposed to act. And so service is one of the spiritual disciplines that we should practice daily. This is a long quote from the Wesley Study Bible, but I kind of liked it and I thought it was appropriate. The sanctifying grace of God shaped the souls of the early Methodists as they learned in community. One cannot learn patience, kindness, gentleness, forgiveness, grace, and love by oneself. As the Spirit deepens our interior lives, we learn to see the world through God's eyes. We discover that God also invites us to see the world through the eyes of those who suffer and are in need, as if we were in their place. The complete Christian life involves organizing, methodizing, our lives to serve others with passion, consistency, and thoroughness. So what is service? Service is allowing ourselves to be humble enough to provide the basic needs or to provide whatever needs or service of a person or people. Service may or may not be glorified work, but we still serve because we are experiencing and living in the sanctifying grace which is moving us all towards perfection so that we can clearly show people the love of God through Jesus Christ, not just because no one else is stepping up to the plate. So the discipline of service is not self-serving, which is serving others to feel better or to gain people's gratitudes becomes self-serving activity. We should give expecting nothing in return. So we're going to perform services for other people out of our love for God so that they can get what they need to live. And we should not expect any compensation or recognition. That's why Jesus said, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. We should not do acts of service so that we can get credit for it. That's where serving can be harmful. Because in the end, we're serving for the wrong reasons instead of why we should really serve. The right reason is because we love the other person and because the other person needs it, not just because no one else will do it. In 1 Corinthians, Paul is talking about if he does not have love in any of his actions, that anything he does is pointless. And I think that's one of the things about service too. If we serve without love, it doesn't mean anything. And that's how service can be harmful, is if we're serving without love. Service can be helpful because we know who we are. And we're going to try to help and show people and demonstrate to others who they really are. So serving arises from our identity in Christ. We are His servants. Service is not what we do, it is who we are. Service is helpful because God is love. We are made in the image of God. So it is who we are so people can see and experience the love of God because of our actions. Service is helpful when it draws people to God and we act out of love and not duty. But our service can be harmful when we just give and not find ways to empower. So the reason that we serve is because we love God and we love people. The two big commandments there, which are the will of God for everyone's life. One of the ways that we love people and we serve them is by empowering them with the knowledge of God first of all. But we can also empower them with the skills and tools and methods instead of just giving a handout and walking away. Sometimes a skill, a tool, a method that we can give to people is just by reminding them that it's good to say thank you or to smile, or to find a way to pay it forward to somebody else. Zechariah and Luke knew his priestly duty was to go serve in the temple, and that meant to go burn incense and to pray. So when his division was called up, that's where he went. That's where he was supposed to do. It was his family business, but he may have gone there thinking that this was his duty, this was the law, this is what he was supposed to do. But he had an experience inside the temple. And so many of us can get into a place of serving because that's where we're supposed to be. That's our duty. That's the law of our faith. That's the rules of the Christian life, but that is so far beyond grace. That's why I started talking about grace. And remember, we're in the movement, in the life and the experience of sanctifying grace, knowing that we don't deserve it because we did not do anything to earn the grace. We serve others simply because freely we have received, so freely we give. Service is born out of our love and gratitude. It requires humility, strength, and love. When Zechariah was in the temple burning incense, he had this vision of an angel, which is a messenger. So a messenger of God came and spoke to him. You have to imagine that he was pretty humble at that point. Because how many people can say, in that time, said that they had an angel come and talk to them? And that's what it's like, really, to knowingly live in the grace and the love of God. Because we can openly speak with our Creator. We can entertain people and think that they're just people, but we may be entertaining angels, as it says in Hebrews. We're not serving to get recognition of others. We don't serve to even get recognition from God. Check this out. We serve because God already recognized us, and we recognize God. We can see other people through the eyes of God. We can see their potential. We can see where they're lacking. And we can be there to provide a need. We can be the answer to somebody's prayer if we are open to it. Service can be helpful because we're going to provide immediate needs with immediate relief to people, but it can be harmful because it can create a place where we just keep giving and fueling other people, whether we're giving them food, a cry on the shoulder, clothes, like a clothes closet, or being there just to put whatever fire out in their life that they have at that particular time. Serving constantly can be harmful to us because if we don't take the time to restore our souls by coming to worship, reading the scriptures, praying, singing, John's favorite thing.
I have to ask you, where did you come up with?
Where'd I come up with? I just pick on you just because you're always quiet.
I just don't know what he's singing when he's here, that's all.
Oh. Well, he's going to change that. He's going to have lyrics and stuff.
Yeah, he gives me a sheet of paper to read from, we can sing.
Yeah, I'll make sure to tell Wes that.
Tell Wes you did.
I've already told him.
Yeah.
I asked him if he would. He said he would have it the next day, but then I said, I'm not going to be here the next day. So do bring him in any case.
And I will remind him.
And by the way, in that book, it says that John Wesley would probably approve of our contemporary hymns and songs because in its day, Charles's hymns were contemporary.
And you know, when John Wesley was organizing and methodizing the approach to worship, that technically was a contemporary worship for them in their time too.
Yes, it was. But it always started with either prayer or song.
Yeah. And when we come to worship, we allow God's love to refill us because we get drained and exhausted. Spiritually, physically, mentally. Resourcefully, sometimes. So Jesus illustrated many important aspects of service. First of all, he never took away the position of a leader. He did show that a leader is not there just to tell people what to do. The leader is there to serve the followers so that the followers can go out and serve the masses. So he took a towel and he wiped their smelly, grimy feet and he cleansed them. And we'll do that today as part of a worship service, but some people would say it'd be kind of weird to take a towel and just go wash people's feet off the street. That's not our culture, so we wouldn't do that. I don't know if I would do that to anyone.
Well, you have to take the context in which Jesus in his time they washed their feet.
Yeah, well, it was right before before they ate.
And it's at the bit on the dusty road. I mean, you have to look at the context.
Yeah.
They wore sandals, did they not? So,
Hey, I'm wearing sandals. So one of the things that I find interesting about the Pope today is that he goes out and constantly finds ways to serve the less fortunate. The Pope tries to get out of his bubble and just so he can be out with the people. And he tries to escape the bubble without many people knowing what he's doing.
Good.
And people think the world of him because that's what he does. So what do people say about us? What do people say about us individually or collectively? People say that the church is slow moving and it's only there for their own interest, but We know that's not true. It's because of our faith. Sometimes things need to take time to develop so that it can be more beneficial later on down the line to provide the best service and opportunities and get the right people lined up, because you obviously really don't want to do something just to do it. There has to be a plan involved. But the church is out to serve the people. That's the true mission of the church. What do people say about you and I? If I were to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, and I already know the answer to this, so you don't have to say anything. 10 being the absolute best, how would you rate yourself as a servant? Do we lovingly reach out to serve because we want to, or do we serve because we have to? If we serve out of an attitude of have to, we may not show the grace. We're going to get frustrated with people. So the question we have to answer is, do we want our service to be helpful, or do we want our service to be harmful? Which really comes down to, why do we serve? And we serve out of love. Love of God, love of people. We serve out of godly love for people. I'm going to start using that. Agape.
Which is not romantic love, it is the love of a person.
And an agape love is truly a love that we can't fathom in our infinite. It has infinite beings. And God has so much agape love for us that He came down in human form, Jesus Christ. And He served His disciples. The mission of Jesus Christ was not just to die on the cross and be resurrected. The mission of Christ really included teaching us how to live and showing us how to live and serve. And living a life of humility, but also being humiliated. And still stepping up and being the better person. And He asks us to do the same thing. We serve because God first loved us. 1 John 4:19. We love because God first loved us. We serve because He first loved us. So, who do we serve? Right off the bat, it's easy to say God. But if we really look at our actions, if we really look at our thoughts, or we can show some kind of hurt when we don't get the recognition, that's when we're going to realize that we're really serving for us. Am I stepping on any toes yet?
Many times people, and myself, serve for myself. My own self-gratification.
Yeah.
Heck yes.
And if we're really serving God, it wouldn't matter what anyone else says or what anyone else thinks or does, because we know why we're there. And if we remember that we're serving God, we're going to see Christ in those around us. Which means that we don't look at their circumstances. We won't get frustrated with them. We won't just tell them that they have to be or act a certain way. We'll just embrace and welcome them and show them a better life that they could have. Because God served us through Jesus Christ, we serve others because the Holy Spirit of God is living in us. The sad thing is that there are people performing acts of service today and they don't realize that it's God in them. That's one of the things that is incredible, is that there are people that don't know why they serve. They don't know why they started this nonprofit. And it's because God put this giftedness, God put His Spirit in them in order to be able to do it. And that's why it's important to not just do service, but tell people why we're serving. Then it becomes more powerful. It's something off of ourselves. It's for a greater purpose than just me doing a good thing for somebody else. But there's also going to be these people that say, I've served all this time. I've been on these committees. I've done all this, and I just keep doing this stuff. But our service really should bring us into a deeper realization that we are God's servants, because in serving others, we become channels of God's love and compassion. So self-righteous service comes through human effort. True service comes from a relationship with the divine other deep inside. Self-righteous service is impressed with the big deal. True service finds it almost impossible to distinguish the small from the large service. Self-righteous service requires external rewards. True service rests contented in hiddenness. Self-righteous service is highly concerned about results. True service is free of the need to calculate results. Self-righteous service picks and chooses whom to serve. True service is indiscriminate in his ministry. Self-righteous service is without sensitivity. It insists on meeting the need even when to do so would be destructive. True service can withhold the service as freely as perform it. Self-righteous service fractures community. True service, on the other hand, builds community. And that's from a book, Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And if you haven't ever read that, I would recommend that book to you. So here's a final illustration of the story, and you should recognize this, John, because it was in the revival book. And Adam Hamilton says that he remembers sitting in a nursing home with a wonderful Methodist woman named Helen. She was in her 80s and was recuperating from a fall. As we visited, he says, she told me her faith story. She had been a Methodist her entire life. She had served in every leadership position in the church. She was a tremendous volunteer. Even then, as she was recuperating, she was anxious to come back to church. As I prepared to pray with her, she said, "Can I tell you something I've been afraid to tell anyone else?" And Adam said, "Sure, Helen, what is it?" And Helen said, "You speak of Christ in such a personal way. You talk with him, you trust him, you speak with him as though he were your daily companion. I've never known what that was like. I believe in him and I've sought to serve him. I read my Bible, I pray, but I have never felt his presence or the sense that he loved me." So Adam says that he told Helen that it was clear to him that she was God's child and that she had faithfully followed Christ her whole life. Adam said, "I want you to remember, Helen, that every moment you are alive, Christ is here by your side. I came here to simply remind you of this. And Helen, he does love you. You are his child, his beloved. Your task is to trust that this is so." And Adam went on to say, "I want you to think of the moment in your life when you felt most loved by another. Maybe your father or mother when you were a little girl. This is a glimpse of the love Christ has for you." And Helen, that's how I think about him. The Bible tells me that he loves me deeply, and I trust that it's so. And then I rest in that love. I talk with him daily, and I thank him a lot, and I listen to him throughout the day through people like you, in my experiences, and chiefly in the scriptures I read. Then I invited Helen to pray with me these words. "Lord, I believe that you love me, and I love you too. I offer all that I am and all that I have to you. Help me to trust like a child that you are always by my side. And help me to live for you and honor you in all that I do." And he goes on to say, no one had ever invited Helen to do something as simple, as powerful, as placing her life in God's hands and personally trusting God's love. Helen had been a Christian and served her whole life. But in that moment, she trusted in the unfailing love of God made known to us in Jesus Christ. And here's the kicker of every message. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter how we serve. We serve because we have been given grace. Grace beyond anything that we could ever imagine. And for us to live in that grace means that we're going to experience joy and peace and love and kindness above understanding. And people are going to think that we're nuts, and that's okay. But when we serve out of that love of God. And then we can express that love to people. And that is why we serve. It's because of the grace we have been given. Amen.